Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program Midday Discourse on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining on today's edition of the program. On today's edition, we'll be looking at the power sector, and based on the new trajectory now going on within the power sector, we want to look at energy transition and its sustainability. We will be looking at the challenges based on the current happenings now in Nigerian power sector. Good news. We haven't had issues around the power grid being collapsed, and also power outage hasn't been in some parts of Nigeria due to the collapse of the national grid. So on that note, we are tilting towards renewable energy and sustainability. So now, since we're tilting towards this angle, now we want to do a little bit of background check on what energy really is and how the transition is going so far and how it's going to be sustained based on the numbers that this current administration and also the Energy Commission of Nigeria has been doing. But before we get into all of this conversation, let me bring you up to speed with the current happenings and how this energy transition tends to happen. Energy transition and sustainability refers to the fundamental shift in how energy is produced, distributed, and consumed, moving away from fossil fuel and towards cleaner, more sustainable energy source like renewables. This transition is crucial for addressing climate change and achieving a sustainable future, requiring a move towards a system centered on renewable energy source such as solar, wind, hydropower, and geometal. So looking at this now, Nigeria has installed electricity generation capacity is approximately 14,000 megawatts, but currently Nigeria can only transmit between 7,000 and 8,000 megawatts, with about 6,000 megawatts currently being distributed nationwide. After over a century of power sector development, we are now generating around 4,000 megawatts before this current administration. In just 2 years, President Bola Tinubu's administration has added another 2,000 megawatts to our generation capacity, demonstrating significant progress. Looking at this piece now, we will find out how confident this administration will be to double the power generation capacity before the end of the first 4 term, which is what we're expecting to see before the end of this term, based on the Renewed Hope agenda and the initiative created within power generation and also transition into sustainable, cleaner power and affordable energy. So we are going to look at how all of this will be achieved within the next 4 years. That is doubling the current capacity that is being transmitted. So looking at it now, there are major roles, but based on the roles and initiative being created by the energy sector, the Energy Commission, and also being championed by the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's Renewed Hope agenda. It says Nigeria launched its Energy Transition Plan, ETP, at COPA 26, aiming for a net zero emission by 2060, while also addressing energy poverty. The ETP, that's Energy Transition, outlines paths for low-carbon development across key sectors like power, transportation, and as well as industry. Nigeria's transition involves scaling up renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, and aligning policies with global climate targets. So we'll be looking at it from this angle of what Paris and also the SDG of the United Nations is also talking about. So whatever plans that the federal government will be having in line with the Energy Commission has to be in line with the United Nations and, basic climate change that we'll be looking at. So we'll be having conversation with an energy consultant who is going to be joining us virtually, but we'll be going on a quick break, and then when we return back, we'll have all of this conversation. We'll look at the challenges and the considerations around energy transition, and how complex the process and requirements would be for a careful execution, ensuring a just transition and protect vulnerable communities, workers, and fossil fuel industries in crucial areas. We'll also look at how we address intimacy of some renewable energy sources through energy storage and grid infrastructure, which is very essential. The transition requires significant investment in new technology and infrastructure. Looking at all of this, we'll also look at international cooperation, as I mentioned earlier, Paris and the United Nations, whatever that, Nigeria has to do now has to be in line with the G20. So we'll have all of this conversation just shortly after this break. Stay with us. Many thanks for joining us. If you just joined, this is Midday Discourse, and we're just set to get into the conversation. We're looking at power sector and energy transition and sustainability. That's what we'll be looking at today. So joining me from Dundee is Sani Musa, who is an energy expert. Good afternoon, Sani. Thank you for joining on today's edition of Midday Discourse.
Thank you so much, Samuel. I'm excited to join you on this session.
I would say congratulations to you again on your graduation, I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Samuel.
Yes, all right. Let's get into the conversation of the day. And I know this is the fun part for you. Let's look at the power sector and also energy transition and sustainability. Transiting, from the normal that we're used to isn't just the question now. The major question is how it's going to be sustained. So we'll be looking at all of those now. But for now, let me bring you up to speed, and I'm sure you have these facts correct. As Nigeria has installed electricity generation capacity is approximately 14,000 megawatts currently as we speak. And Nigeria is only currently transmitting between 7,000 and 8,000 megawatts, with approximately 6,000 megawatts currently distributed nationwide after over a century of power sector development. And looking at these angles now, generating around 4,000 megawatts before this current administration. But in just 2 years, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration has added 2,000 megawatts to our generation capacity, demonstrating significant progress. So looking at this pace of movements now by the energy sector, and this is being done and championed by the Director General of Energy Commission, Abdullahi Mustafa. Looking at this pace at which the Energy Commission is moving and also the energy transition in Nigeria, what is your assessment with this current administration's addition to what we previously have, Musa?
So, first of all, I would like to start by, making a very good introduction of myself. Not really for me to tell myself as what I have been doing, but in the Nigeria's context. You see, when Bola Tinubu came, the data was not that much, and now you are mentioning how he added our capacity from a very significant amount, from what used to be something that could not be enough for the country, to now adding a significant megawatts of electricity through the Energy Commission. So the comment is that this is a laudable initiative, of course, because we're a country of over 200 million people, with over 30 million people still lacking access to clean energy. Not even clean energy, still lacking access to electricity. So I think this is a very welcoming development, which the Tinubu administration has really done well. However, it is always important for policy makers and also advocates to always call for more, because we are a country very rich in potential and in resources. So I think we have everything it takes to do better and to give Nigerians not just electricity access, but reliable electricity access, so that every hour of the day people can be comfortable knowing that they have electricity for their use. So I think there is a lot to do. While it is commendable, but there is a lot of rooms for better development, and also for more increase in the capacity.
Obviously would always ask for more. But looking at it now from this other angle now, the role of Nigeria has launched its energy transition plan at COP26, aiming at a net zero emission by 2060, while also addressing energy poverty. Like you rightly mentioned, a country with over 200 million Nigerians, and over 30 million of that significant is actually having
Like,
power challenges and all. By 2060, which is in the next couple of years now, how well do you think that Nigeria would be able? Do you think Nigeria is at the right path of achieving, this feat in terms of settling or minimizing to the barest minimum, like the report says, zero of energy poverty? Do you think it's very feasible?
yeah, so you see, that is a very bold ambition set by the government. 2060 is quite a fair amount of time, because we are talking about of 35 years from now. So I think based on the trajectory that we are, by 2060, if we maintain this trajectory of adding transmission capacities, also adding generation capacities, I think we would achieve that. However, when you talk about net zero and you talk about energy poverty, there are two distinct terms. Energy poverty is the absence of the energy, whether it is clean, not clean, whatever it is. It is the complete absence of it. And you talk of net zero, which means that the energy has to be very clean, it has to be sustainable, it has to be environmentally friendly. So there are two terms. But what we currently have in Nigeria is not just the issue of us being clean or not clean. What we have in Nigeria is us being poor, to the extent that some people do not even have the luxury of seeing light. I know villages that still they don't have that light. They still rely on taking their phones to the nearby cities to charge, and using lanterns and all. So we have that problem, which is a very big issue. And then you talk about energy poverty in the terms where people that have access to the electricity do not have it reliably. This means that they don't have 24 hours supply. Some even don't have up to a half day supply. So there are two distinct terms that we are having problem with. So when the government say net zero, okay, that is bold and all. It is achievable, but based on the current trajectory, I think the government has to do more. The government has to double up in its effort and commitments toward providing electricity. I know what the Rural Electrification Agency is doing, which is absolutely commendable, trying to electrify rural areas, and also our universities try to reduce the workload on the grid, which shall make the grid more sustainable to accommodate all the load on it, so that people can have more and more electricity for themselves. So I think we are only gonna have a clearer understanding of whether 2060 is an achievable target or not, maybe in the next 5 years, when we see this administration what they are doing, or when we see the administration that is coming from 2027 to the next 4 years, what they are doing, their bold plans about energy. But so far, I think there is a need for more to be done. While we are also, moving very well. If you look at the statistics, 2 years ago, there is quite an appreciation to notice. So I think we have a very long way to go. 35 years could look like a big number of years, but when you are talking about energy, some things that have to be done now. For instance, if you are doing energy now, the PPAs, you signed them for 25 years, they have not started taking shape right now. So what do you think? If you look at 30 years from now, when we need projects on the pipeline right now, we need those projects, and they are missing, they are absent. So it's gives you some kind of doubts in yourself to say, okay, can we achieve this or not? So for us to achieve that, then we need to start creating that project from today, so that in the next 30 years we're able to have, even if it is not a completely net zero, but a certain degree of cleanness in our energy sector. I think we have more to do.
Abdullah Mustafa last year made mention of when the last time the national grid collapsed, he made mention of decentralizing energy. That's like from what you mentioned, that's taking off some level of load of the national grid that now would be able to help, keep the peace within the energy
Yeah,
sector, and also the national grid won't get to collapse that much. If that
yeah.
does happen, now talking about sustainability, now if that does get sustained, do you see Nigeria achieving this goal that it set by 20 in the next 35 years?
Yeah, you see, when you talk about making the national grid very reliable to accommodate all the loads on it, you talk about aggregating, you talk about reducing the loads, and how you reduce those loads is by empowering people. I mentioned it in in our previous interview, by empowering people to own their own solar home systems. That way they can not only provide the energy for themselves, but also they can transfer the access to the national grid, thus making the national grid only available or only accessible for people who are not able to have that kind of solar home system. So I think that is a very brilliant strategy that needs to be done. But this thing comes with so much cost. It comes with a lot of things to be done on the government side. These solar materials, they have to be incentivized so that investors can bring them, and the marketplace can be able to accommodate and afford all these things. And when you talk about achieving the net zero, I would always tell you that Nigeria is a hugely endowed nation with a lot of resources, not just about clean energy, but also about the hydrocarbons. We have a lot of oil, we have a lot of natural gas, and these are, energy sources that are termed to be not environmentally sustainable. So if you look at it very well in a very critical angle, um, you say, okay, in the next 35 years, are we ready to divert or to not explore those kind of natural resources that we have of hydrocarbons, and are we really trying to do this kind of investment in the renewable energy space? So it's going to be a very difficult one for the government. I don't think the government is ready for that. However, as I mentioned, 35 years is a long year. And on the other side, you now talk about what is currently happening. So for us to determine whether it is achievable or not, then we have to see on the table, what is the Energy Commission doing right now? How many projects have signed PPAs? I mean public-private partnerships. Yeah, the PPAs. How many developers have come to the country and are willing to develop energy? Because solar projects are projects that require a long-term project. When you build them, you need years of up to 15 to 20 years to be able to make profit out of them. So if those projects are not existing right now, then it questions that idea of 2060, the agenda of 2060. And as I will always tell you, the priority of our government should not just be about achieving net zero. The priority of our government should be about achieving energy sufficiency. We have so much poverty in Nigeria, energy poverty at its peak. So we need to first fight that energy poverty, then talk of energy net zero. Because if you look at these developed economies like the United States and also like in Europe, you would see that they are only talking about net zero because they have attained energy sufficiency. To some extent, they do not have energy poverty. Everywhere there is energy. So now they are talking about how to clean and how to make that energy very sustainable. So for us, our priority should always be how to make everyone have that energy with them. So by 2060, it would be more interesting, and then we can elongate the agenda into making it cleaner. Yeah.
Even this and adaptation, obviously, of renewable energy, how well do you think Nigerians are? What role do you think the citizens of the country now? We know the workload is not just going to be for the government alone or the Energy Commission alone. Individuals and citizens of the said nation would have to play a certain role to see all of this being achievable. So, what role And again, what role do Nigerians need to play to see to this achievement in terms of adaptation? And again, what are the key drivers of energy transition, and how do you see us achieving this feat?
Okay, so you see, energy is a very big sector that is in the hand of the government. It's a basic necessity, just like education, security, and social welfare. So what the citizens can do largely depends on what the government is able to do for them. For instance, the citizens cannot afford solar equipment if they don't have a decent living, if they don't have a decent source of income. So the government has to provide that kind of things. Again, these citizens cannot be able to even access this kind of renewable energy solutions if the government does not open its borders, if the government does not reduce its VATs on these items. So that means there is more to be done on the side of the government than it is on the side of the citizens. It is very simple for the citizen because every citizen would want to find something that is more affordable for them, more reliable for them. So I think the issue of adaptability from the citizen side is not going to be a problem at all. But what we need more concern, or what we need to do more, is for the government to put these things into place, for the government to ensure that these citizens can afford that. And when you talk about the drivers of energy transition, there are many drivers. If we are talking about the economic drivers, which are, of course, the issues of having a decent living, the issues of incentives, government incentivizing investors, calling investors to do this. As I mentioned, renewable energy is a very capital intensive industry and only requires huge billions into it, because it is not easy, to start and even be profitable. So investors need some certain guarantees. I would always talk about the political instability that we have in the nation, the currency volatility, which is a very big issue. Investors won't want a scenario where they buy something at a dollar and tomorrow they need to convert more naira to get that dollar, and in the end they are only working for or in the end the exchange rate is just killing their business. So we need to work on these currency volatilities. We need to work on our instability. We need government through the Energy Commission to establish laws and rules that will stay for years, for decades, and for many administration. Rules that would outlive every administration that comes. This way investors will see it from afar. These investors could come from anywhere, from any part of the country, and they would come and invest. And once they invest, everyone gets to access this kind of material at a very affordable and quality standard. Again, I would like to mention to you that you see, there are a lot of people wanting to do business in Nigeria. For instance, if you are talking about how the government can do, many countries would want to. It is already believed that Africa has the best potential for renewable energy. You talk of the solar, you talk of the wind, you talk of the hydropower, and you talk of everything. Africa has that potential, but yet only 3% of the global investment comes to Africa. It is a very disturbing paradox which needs to be addressed. But government can do better. Nigeria's government under Tinubu, I have seen they have started doing very well, which is absolutely commendable. Giving some guarantees through the infrastructure credit. That is very, very important. And the last thing I would mention is that we need a strong credit institution in Nigeria where the government can help people, access credit. This power they do, like, people should not need to get a lot of money to be able to purchase this, and some come in millions of naira and some in hundreds of thousands, which the families do not have to make that one time payment. So if government can create a solution or a system where people can access this renewable energy solution at a very affordable, not just an affordable standard, but also at a very in a style where they pay installmentally, I think that will go a long way in helping people to adapt to it. And then last thing is, you see, any country that really wants to make change has to start by developing standard policies, design clear pathways, and then advocate citizens, tell them the essences of doing this and that. In the long run, it's going to be a benefit for the country and it's going to be the benefit for people. But I would always say that Nigeria's focus should not be about net zero right now. It should be about solving the energy poverty that we have in the country.
Not just energy poverty, because there's poverty obviously in the land this year, last year, and this year we've seen a bit of Nigerians coming out to agitate about the current hardship in the country. But looking at those now, which is obviously one of the challenge, but how can we ensure that energy transition is as just and equitable, particularly for vulnerable population and communities? You rightly mentioned earlier that you know some communities here in Nigeria that are still battling with energy and still using lantern and all. Even some persons still cooking with firewood still. So how can, having these issues and these challenges now, how can individuals like collaborations and signing of memorandum, how can they play a massive role given the kind of population Nigeria have, to have a clean transition, and also not just having this transition but having it being sustained for generations, as you mentioned?
Yeah, you see, the issue of poverty always is interlinked with how our economy is going on. And there is always going to be poverty where there is lack of electricity, lack of power. Because when you have sustainable power, that is when industries will work. And when industries work, people get jobs. And when people get jobs, their life, their standard of living improves, and also the security of the nation improves. So you can bring all these problems and tie them down to what we currently have, which is lack of energy. And that is why it is very important for African governments and even Nigeria's government to prioritize in providing electricity for people. I would always say that if I should get the position and a chance, to be at the helm of affairs, the first thing I would do is to ensure that Nigeria has a 24/7 electricity, because it will go a long way in solving our issues, even the Almajiri problem, the poverty, count them, the insecurity, and everything. We have seen countries that have developed very fast, simply because their energy sector is really sustainable. Now we are talking of organizations signing memorandum. You see, Mr. Samuel, the thing is that we have a lot of organizations that are already doing that. And but when you talk about the national issues, which are very, very challenging and often discouraging this kind of investment and organizations into playing very well, you tend to, ask, why can the government do better? So there is organizations that are doing that, trying to build mini grids in different cities. I know some mini grids developments are happening in Jigawa State. I know some are happening across our universities in Nigeria. I know some mini grid development in Abuja, some metropolitan areas of Abuja. So the public can help in coming to patronize these kinds of mini grids. And let me tell you, sometimes we don't necessarily have to leave it to the government here, because the Nigeria's government has given people the freedom to generate their own power. So as an individual owner, you can purchase your solutions and do it, or as an investor, you can go and develop your mini grid and start selling to people. So communities can actually come together. Let me tell you, in Switzerland, in the early days of Switzerland, when it was coming up, someone told me that how they started generating their electricity is by communities coming together to generate their own power and then share. They came together, afford transformers, and then they share by themselves. I remember growing up in Nigeria in an old village called Saya. Myself, I knew how electricity came to our village, and I knew how electricity went to the other villages that are close to the village I stayed in. People came together, contributed money, and then started to buy pole for transmission, wire for transmission, and even the transformer. So governments only came when they saw those kind of efforts. So I think our people need to also go back to that kind of traditional way of doing things. Even Switzerland did that at some point. So Nigeria should also try as much to do that, not just with the normal electricity, but with the transition, with the clean energy that we are talking about.
On a quick break, and then when we return back, we'll continue this conversation as we look around regulatory frameworks and how they can support or hinder this development. Just stay with us, we'll be right back. Yes, many thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is still Midday Discourse here on Global Television. We're having conversations with Sani Musa Ibrahim, who is joining us from Dundee, and we're having conversation around power sector and energy transition and its sustainability based on the numbers that we're doing right now, that Nigeria is doing now in the energy sector. So we're looking at how this trajectory can be sustained, not just being sustained, but also how it can be increased. So we're having this conversation and then, looking at the challenges and angles where the Energy Commission and the government need to step in, as well as the Rural Electrification Agency, angles where they need to step in and then, handle most of these challenges and provide Nigerians with the dividends of having good power, sustainable power. So looking at all of this now, and given the fact that Africa has the higher potential based on research, Africa has the higher percentage of generating its own energy, but this challenge is now going around within the African region. Now we are looking at how all of this will be, mitigated and settled based on regulatory frameworks and policies by this African nation. So Sunny, looking at these angles now, how key is it going to be, or is the regulatory framework going to play in terms of achieving more than the 3% that African investment is just getting in terms of energy generation?
Okay, so I would like to repeat exactly what I said last week in South Africa. This applies not just to Nigeria, but to all African countries. We have some tools that we underutilize, and one of this is the tool of aggregation platforms. What I mean with aggregation platforms is that in Africa, we lack that kind of platforms because most of these renewable energy companies or startups are not utility scale utility startups. What that means in simple terms is that investments in renewable energy come in very big numbers. They come in millions and billions. And some of the startups that we have, or some of the energy projects that we have, are not projects that amount up to that kind of number. Thus, investors are often not interested, since most of these investors are development financing institutions and other very big venture capitalists. So we need an aggregation platform that can combine energy projects, 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, combine them all together so that they can form a utility scale project that can be financed by relevant financing institutions. That is one thing that is currently underutilized. Second thing is policy. The issue of Africa is that Africa is not trusted. The risk is high in terms of policy. The risk is high in terms of currency. The risk is high in a lot of other things, and even the market environment. So government needs to work very hard to do that. Again, another underutilized tool is that we need a green energy investment bank, maybe backed by African Development Bank or other development finance institutions. Just imagine West Africa having a green energy bank, or just Central Bank of Nigeria, empowering local banks to start to give loans and to start to give investments in green energy, because the current reality is that banks hardly give out loans to renewable energy projects, and it is quite understandable because renewable energy projects are long-term tenure projects. It means that they take from 15 years to 20 years to be able to balance the money, and banks are not really interested in this kind of investment. Banks want to invest 1 year, 2 year, 5 years and get their returns. So we need the central banks in Africa, or let me say Nigeria, since it is the context here, to empower our local banks and mandate them to start giving out loans to investors, to project like this. So that will, make it more abundant. Project will come up and would have more projects, and even target bigger investment. Finally, I would repeat myself, just as I mentioned in many places. The most underutilized tool by African government is the tool of trust. Trust in our institutions, trust in our developers, trust in our own potential, because there are a lot of young people and of course indigenous companies that can do these things, but then the trust is not there. So our government really need to invest in this kind of trust. Our institutions need to be reputable, they need to be trusted by investors. Policies need to be standard and stable. We need to trust our developers. We need to provide them with all the means. We need to give them the loans. We need to give them all the money they need so that they can do it, and trust in our potentials. We need to empower individuals, human capacity, and do a lot of things. So without this tool of trust, nothing is coming to Africa. We have only 3% simply because investors think Africa should not be trusted. The risk is very high. But when we have trust, when we have reputable institutions, people would want to come. Investors know already that to make money in renewable energy, you need to invest in Africa. So they're already looking forward for that, provided that the government, make this environment very trustworthy.
Trust is actually very something very very big, and we're hoping that the government is working towards achieving all of this. But based on that, we've seen other form of investment coming into the country from different angles, mostly within oil and all. But let's ask, this is very key that we'll need to talk about, based on energy transition. How well do you think it will be able to align, talking about how can we ensure the energy transition and how it's going to align with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and also the Paris Agreement on climate change? Because we can't have conversation within energy transition and not have the conversation within climate change. So how can all of this, based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Agreement with climate change, how can all of this, work hand in hand to see that we get this transition done?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Samuel. That is why I'm telling you, countries need to really understand their problems and solve them depending on their context. The question of Paris Agreement, United Nations Sustainability Agenda, they are all very important, but only more important is the situation at hand. Do people have energy? Do people have electricity? Can people afford the oil? Can people afford the electricity bills? These are the indigenous issues that need to be solved first before talking about anything sustainability and other things. People should not die because they do not have electricity. First, let's have that. Second thing is that even countries where the United Nations is headquartered, the United States, as of today, has increased its production of fossil fuel. It is the major producer in the world. So investment should come. Anything that provide dignity to that economy. Nigeria's economy, if you look very well at it, we hugely depend on oil. So any slash on our oil production or any slash on that sector is going to affect not just the oil sector but the entire economy. So, but we need to be strategic while we are also encouraging investment. I don't see investment into the oil or the fossil fuel field as a problem, but it is always important for us to have investment coming into the transition into the renewable energy space as well. While the oil is doing its own to maintain the economy and drive the economy, we should have more and more into this. And there's a way of doing this. We can incentivize. As we are selling more crude and making more profit from oil, we can incentivize renewable energy companies to come and do business and provide clean energy for our people. So investment in oil is not really the problem, but the problem is lack of utilizing the profit in the best and cleanest way and in a very equitable way. Yeah.
All right, Sani, thank you so much for taking our time to join us on today's edition of Midday Discuss. This is how much time will sadly permit us to take.
Thank you, Samuel. I really appreciate.
All right, this is how much time will permit us to take on today's edition of Midday Discuss. My name is Samuel Odi. I'll see you again as we discuss further. Bye for now.